In about 2012 is when I realized I've got to get into an augmentation through automation. And that was the beginning journey. I ended up buying a tech company to create 360IA. So I bought an existing company that had built our prototype. And that was the first time I had acquired a company. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, with the why, you have to know exactly why you're in business. And one thing about why for me is that I believe all of our purpose is the same, and that's ultimately to help others. That burning problem is more tied to what am I passionate about? Am I passionate about solving this problem? Because when you take the solution to that burning problem or your passion, and you tie that in with the purpose of using it to help others, that could be users, that could be clients, that could be customers, that could be employees, and it definitely also can be your community and your investors. So when you look at that across the board, how is this going to help others? And you put that alongside with your burning passion, that's where the why really comes into play and becomes a powerful force for the company.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Today, we're going to have a conversation about scaling your company, but not in the traditional sense. We've talked a lot about different aspects of scaling companies. We're going to talk about your employees. Specifically, how do you align the passions that they have in the work that they're doing so that they are working more with the passions that really drive them? And then we're also going to unpack the others first culture. And Frankie is a speaker, is an author, and is also a former CEO of two companies actually that have made the Inc. list. One of them as high as 50th on the list of all 5,000 companies. So that's pretty amazing. 360IA was that company. And then he also has Protenza, which was another company that he founded that made the Inc. list, I think 3 times, he said. So Frankie and I talk about this passions at work, what that really does. When you find what people are passionate about, they will have much more engagement around the work that they're doing. And that is a really good thing. And then we spent a lot of time looking at this others first culture. It was the first time I'd heard this concept, but I want to make sure that we unpack it for you because I think it's really interesting. What I like most about it is the fact that I really believe this. I might call it different things, but when you are willing to put others first and not serve your own self-interest, that you will have the kind of culture that everyone feels supported and valued. And that is an amazing place to work at. My job is to help you create growth in your company. Now, it could be by looking at some of the strategies and some of the things that are going on. Great. But we've been doing a leadership assessment. We call it the leadership performance assessment that allows you to determine where you're playing well and where you're missing out. We have 7 dials that we want to quantify for you. And I do this with you. It's customized. It's not a cookie cutter approach, but we're looking at the qualitative score of these. We're also looking at the quantitative scores as we dive deeper into those aspects so that you can prioritize and plan for how to improve your company growth, your company leadership, company culture. All of those things are interrelated. We talk about that inside this leadership performance assessment. If you want to schedule that, just go to genehammett.com and schedule your call today. When you think about what's missing in your culture, my guess is you're so close to it, you don't have a chance to really identify what's missing and how to prioritize these things. I help you do that. I've been doing this for more than a decade, and I'd love to help you too. If you feel like you're a good fit for this, meaning you're more than 2 million, we'd love to talk to you. Most of our clients are in the 10 to kind of 50 million range. But all that being said, love to help you with this leadership performance assessment. Just go to genehammett.com, schedule your call today. Now, here is the interview with Frankie. Frankie, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I am fantastic. We're going to have a great conversation today about some of the work you've been living and writing about. First and foremost, one of your companies recently made the Inc. list at 50. The next year it followed up at 387. Tell us about 360IA.
All right, great. Yeah. So 360IA is a software technology product company. So we created an intelligent automation software. It was actually born out of the issues we had with a previous company called Potenza Inc. that I had that did not have as much growth, but still had significant growth. And what we found was that 360IA was a necessity because we were not going to survive in the industry we were in, which was marketing and also broadcast for television stations, things like that. And so 360IA was a solution to that. We were a software product licensing to businesses, helping them with business intelligence, marketing automation, and we ended up getting into prediction modeling to where we were able to predict purchasing before it would happen or before the shopping would occur. And so it was some exciting times, and that's how we got on the list.
Fantastic. And I'll add in there the benefit. You made the list twice with 360IA and 5 times with Potenza Inc.
3 times with 360IA.
Okay, 3. When we're looking at all of this, and I want to make sure that we're talking about, how you got there, because I think the frameworks that are in your book, which we're going to talk about breaking why today, you actually lived it with your companies.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this stuff that was I've written about in both of my books and the book that I'm working on, which is actually called Love Your Weird. All the books are born out of actual experiences that I had. I had to go out and find other research when I wrote these books to verify, that my experience wasn't completely unique, but everything is born out of actual battle tested with my companies. And that's where I just found that I wanted to share that at a broader scale. And that's where the books came into play.
Well, one thing I forgot to say, and maybe I did say it, and I just forgot that I said it, but you sold 360IA. Why would you sell a company that was growing so fast? It was just the right time?
Yeah. So I sold 360IA to a Fortune 500, and it was a timing thing. Basically, we had grown 60x. That year we made number 50. We were fastest growing company in Louisiana. And there's a tipping point that you look for, I believe. And for me, we had reached that. So I was seeing that we were going to hit a glass ceiling if we didn't either have investors come in. I bootstrapped all my companies. So that's something that was another reason why I went ahead and exited, because the best investor that I had looking at it, it made more sense for everyone involved for it to be a full buyout. And it was a good time for me. It was, I had been going hardcore for 20 years as a solo entrepreneur in my companies. And this was an opportunity for me to do a couple things. One, obviously get paid for my company, which had always been doubling back. One thing they don't talk about as much with these Inc. 5000 conferences is that most everybody is broke, because they had to use everything they have to grow that fast. That's, they don't actually have any awards at Inc. 5000 for how much money you're actually making. It's all they're looking at is if you're growing. So you get to a point where you want to be able to diversify. I've always been really passionate about private equity and being able to invest in other people's companies and also thought leadership. So it was a perfect opportunity for me to continue to help that company grow the technology, which they have. They're continuing to scale it, which is awesome. And I've been able to be a part of that with them. But yeah, so that it was just the right timing. I mean, you have to look for those moments where sometimes you hold them, sometimes you fold them, sometimes you run. I think that's how I said it.
Well, Frankie, let's dive into some of the core things that you discovered in building companies that grow fast. One of them is about passion and the why that really drives us as founders and entrepreneurs. What is that really as it relates to growing a business?
Well, I think at the end of the day, in order to grow a business fast, you have to be laser focused on a burning problem. Okay. And so you have to know what that problem is that you solve, and you have to have a mechanism to be able to scale that. And we were able to do that with Potenza Inc. Perfect example of why one company was on the 5,000 list and one was on the 500. It's far easier to get on the 5,000 list than 500. I can tell you that. And we were never going to get there with Potenza Inc., which is not a big deal. Still a great company, but everything was still too done by hand. We hadn't created the augmentation into automation, right? Which has now become a huge part of my business. Recently, I founded another company called Origin AI, which is all about augmenting companies into this AI world. And so that everything that I've tried to do over the years is create a better operating system. With Potenza Inc., I was able to go as far as I could with operating systems like Traction, EOS, things you and I have talked about. And then we hit a wall because there's only so much we could do with humans. So, in about 2012 is when I realized I've got to get into an augmentation through automation. And that was the beginning journey. I ended up buying a tech company to create 360IA. So I bought an existing company that had built our prototype. And that was the first time I had acquired a company. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, with the why, you have to know exactly why you're in business. And one thing about why for me is that I believe all of our purpose is the same. And that's ultimately to help others. That burning problem is more tied to what am I passionate about? Am I passionate about solving this problem? Because when you take the solution to that burning problem or your passion, and you tie that in with the purpose of using it to help others, that could be users, that could be clients, that could be customers, that can be employees, and it definitely also can be your community and your investors. So when you look at that across the board, how is this going to help others? And you put that alongside with your burning passion, that's where the why really comes into play and becomes a powerful force for the company.
We've had a few conversations before we actually got to this recording point and actually recorded this for the audience. But I want you to go back, because you said something earlier. There's a big gap between the passion that a founder may have or a CEO may have, and about the audience that they're serving and the problems they're solving, and how the employees understand that.
Absolutely.
Tell us about that problem.
One of the things I struggled with as a young entrepreneur, and even into like kind of the middle of running these companies, was that I felt like I was so far ahead of my employees. And that may sound exciting at first. It's like, oh, he's a visionary. It's like, yeah, but the problem is the carcasses behind you that can't keep up, right? Because they're just dying off, and you can't figure out, man, why do I have so much employee churn, or why do people not stay that long? And there's some sections of the journey for startups where some people aren't going to make it to the next level up, and that's okay. But I had to start really looking at like, okay, what should my employee turnover look like, and what's going on here? So I had to find creative ways to double back and work on the business instead of just in it. And one of the things I did was I created a 10-step framework. That's what's in my books, both The Art of Why and then now Breaking Why. That 10-step framework is about helping bring the employees and the team up to speed and be a part of the vision. And so really what it's about is figuring out, let's say like for an employee, what is the best use of what they do? Or in other words, what are they passionate about, or what gets them going? What is it that they like to do that is not tied to their paycheck, right? They just love doing it. And as long as you don't get in their way too much or make it worse, they're going to do that indefinitely for you. Making sure that you identify that is part of it. So I would bring them through these exercises to figure out, what is their personal why, right? And how does that why or their passion align with what we're doing at the company? And how can we close as possible put them in a position that makes the most sense for them? Because then what happens is everybody's kind of moving in that same direction. And then if you create pay structures to where as the tides rise, all ships go with it, that's all the people, right? So everybody feels like they're doing it together. Because one thing for us is that the purpose part of our business was that we wanted to make sure that we always had a culture of others first. And so if everybody's putting everybody else first, including the users and the clients, and there's a balance to that, then you have a culture that's prepared for the impact of massive growth.
Now, Frankie just said earlier, I'm so far ahead of my employees. One thing that you want to make sure that you do to make sure that you are able to pull them along is to create a vision that they can understand. And okay, that's good. What you really want to be able to do with that vision is to share it with them over and over again. So I'm going to remind you to repeat yourself more than you probably feel comfortable about this vision. A lot of people will say back to me, I'm getting tired of talking about it. I've told them once. You want to say this over and over and over. You're going to say this at all hands meetings. You're going to say this at quarterly meetings and yearly retreats, but you're also going to say this inside of one-on-one meetings, in small team meetings. You're going to repeat yourself a lot. And then secondly, you want to make sure that you're sharing it in different ways and relating it to the work of each of the individual people. And so you want to find different stories and different angles at which you can use this. So it doesn't feel like you're repeating yourself as much, but you are in alignment consistently with this message. So if you want to make sure that you are pulling people into that vision for what you want, repeat yourself and then find different ways to share that vision across the team. Now back to Frankie. Frankie, I want you to go a little bit deeper into the job descriptions, because I think, most of us have some kind of structure within our organization where each person has some type of job descriptions. They quickly outgrow them. Sometimes we don't update them.
Absolutely.
But you have a different take on this. What is that take?
Yeah. First of all, job descriptions are a total joke. Okay. So they're a total joke. They're created for a model that doesn't exist anymore. Now, do you have to have them? Of course, because we want there to be a level of like respect and let people know where they stand. But in my world, I believe that job descriptions are not nearly as important as the way that people lean into their role, whatever that role is, right? The job description, I've had a lot of job descriptions and they're, to think that is a real indicator of who somebody is or what their why is or how they're going to show up for the company. I mean, it's not that big a deal. I don't care as much about the title as I do about the role, right? So, and the principles behind the role. So that way it's like because one of the biggest issues is that most founders and entrepreneurs, they get wrapped up, and managers too, they get wrapped up in this idea of personalities. They start worrying about the personalities versus just the protocols. Like when something would go wrong at my company, I didn't look at the person and see if they were wrong. I looked at how we were wrong. There's a protocol missing, right? Especially if there was somebody that was passionate about what they do. Is it possible for us to adapt the protocol to fit the person? We can always adapt it back, but as long as it was in line with our core values, then I always tried to, because why not? Anything that could remove the friction to be able to have that maximum growth was the objective. And that friction a lot of times is people trying to do a job they don't belong in.
This reminds me of a conversation I had with a client a couple of weeks ago, where he suspected that there was a lot of people in the organization that were doing work that others should be doing, because they just either they forgot to let go of it when they moved from one place to another, or they just kind of hung on to it. And we actually went through an exercise where they were going to categorize the work that they were doing. And one of the categories we came up with, because these are some of my terms, not your framework, but I'm going to let you kind of connect the dots, is where's your zone of genius? Like what are the types of work that you're doing right now that really inspires you, that gives you energy, and also identify the other stuff.
I love
because
that.
he wanted to be able to give more of the work that was in their zone of genius. You probably have different words for that.
100%.
It's very similar to what you're
I
describing.
look at 100%. It's like at the end of the day, what is it that you are passionate about? So one of the exercises that I always do with audiences and with my former employees was go back to like, what did you love to do when you were 5? Before everybody told you that it was impossible, when you still had the maximum amount of your imagination being used. And in many scenarios, Albert Einstein included in a lot of studies, genius is actually not measured by knowledge, it's measured by imagination. And so if you think about that, like I started doing this thing where instead of having like, you know how they have all those like Myers-Briggs and like colors and like, this is who you are. And some people wear it on their name tag or have it on their cubicle. For me, it was more about like identifying the inner child. Like for me at 5 years old, I was wanting to invent stuff. I wanted to be an astronaut, cowboy, and also a TV preacher. Because back in the 80s, those were like all over the TV. So that was me, right? Like for you, I don't remember. Did I ask you this already, Gene? What your 5-year-old self was?
What I wanted to do?
No, not necessarily what you wanted to do or be when you grew up. It could be that, but just what did you like doing? What did you play make-believe or anything?
I don't remember that far back because I'm now 50, but I do. The earliest memory of that would be my dad worked for Delta Airlines, and everyone asked, "Is your dad a pilot?" Which he wasn't. I wanted to be a pilot.
Yeah, there it is. Okay, so you look at that, right? You want to be a pilot and you don't work at a airline company, right? Is that correct?
Nope.
Yeah, and I don't work at a space company, right? But I still wanted to be an astronaut, and I don't work at a ranch, but I want to be a cowboy. I am kind of a TV preacher, I guess, now that I'm a keynote speaker. It's just not a church. But, you know, the bottom line is how can we bring that out, right? What are things that I can do to bring that part of me into work? And so it's going to look different, and we're not going to do the whole exercise right now, but like that would help people start to think about, hey, what do I really like, you know, and how could I bring some of that into my job? That is what I call love your weird. That weird kid who wanted to be a pilot that like didn't make any sense. You just wanted to be a pilot. You didn't put the pieces together. You know, a lot of stuff that we loved back then. People said you're too old for that eventually, or it's impossible. So anyway, unlocking that genius is actually going back to that piece of it, right? So we would encourage people to look at that. And so from those exercises, and sometimes it was just to have fun and figure out how to play more at work, you know? And I was always real open-minded. Like if we were hitting our objectives, like I didn't care what people did. You know, the dogs and the skateboards and the kegerators and whatever else, I was down with all that, you know, because I didn't care as long as we were growing and we were all in it, like when it counted, I wasn't worried about all that other stuff. So everybody did what made sense. We would talk about it. We would circle back, but we would really encourage people to do what they did best. And sometimes it didn't make sense. And that's when you let somebody go, right? When the core values don't line up with what the person's passion is, it's better to let them go do that. Like if you actually do want to be a pilot, you know, get with your wife and y'all work it out. Some people need to go do that. And we were really, really encouraging of that, to be honest.
Now, Frankie just talked about what do your employees want? Now, one of the things I use with my coaching and with my clients is I ask them to go through a process called shared goals. Very similar to what he's talking about, but I'm just giving you my piece to add to this for you to decide which is better for you. Everyone understands what company goals are. We probably have team goals that are very clear. But the question I ask a lot of managers is, do those individual players have goals aligned to the team goals and to the company goals? And what I really mean by this is, let's say they want to be a better writer, or they want to learn sales. Either one of those are great examples because you want to make sure that you're creating space for that person to grow in the areas at which they want to grow. If they want to be a better writer, give them opportunity to write, give them courses that they can take. Could be, video only just to see if they're into it. If they really are start to get into it, you can give them coaching along this lines and you can really help them. If they want to be better in sales, then give them the support they need. Coaching in sales is very different than management of sales. Now I say that because I've coached, dozens and dozens and dozens of leaders inside the fast growth companies. And I find that coaching sales creates a different experience for that person and activates them in a different way than managing them on the numbers in a traditional sense. So if you want someone to grow, you want to make sure that you are going through a process called shared goals, where you're identifying the goals that they want, and then you figure out how they're aligned or shared with the team and the company goals. Back to Frankie. I do like that term, let them go instead of exit them. And something triggered with me the other day when I heard someone say this, because a lot of times there's some hesitancy to firing someone, but if you looked at it as you let them go to do something else, to do something they're more.
Yeah, you're getting in the way of their why. Like, it's companies every day get in the way of somebody's personal why, period. And they're also getting in the way of some other company's why that person fits in. And so everybody's like a puzzle piece, and you have a place that you fit. And when you're not, you're cramming it into places, you're breaking off pieces, and you wonder why you're burnt out. It doesn't feel right because you're not in the right spot. If everybody was in the right spot, we'd be rolling. And that's the key. My first Inc. 5000 conference I went to, the guy from Zappos Shoes, is it Zappos? Does that sound right?
Yeah.
I think it's Zappos Shoes. Yeah. So he said something. I was like, what? Because back then, this was 15 years ago, probably. I guess, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, something like that. So I went to this conference and this guy, I was at the time so scared about losing employees. I hadn't written any books yet. So I'm just thinking that my objective is not to lose anyone and to make sure that everybody's happy, and we're going to figure all this out, but we don't want to lose anyone. And this is our family now, even though we met yesterday. So he said this, he said, we made up a deal. We said, we'll pay $3,000 to anybody that quits. He offered it to the whole company, $3,000 for quitting. Apparently one, maybe two quit. The rest stayed. But what it sent the message out, and I've said this so many times since then, it took me a couple of years to have the boldness to say it, but I started telling people, look, nobody got drafted into this. This isn't the Army. Nobody got drafted. This isn't Vietnam. This is something that we all chose to do. So for God's sakes, I will pay people to leave if that's what they want. Because the fact is, I don't want to get in the way of their why. That's not who I am. I feel like I have a larger calling than any of my companies. And I always stayed in that space where this is bigger than me. That's why I've had a lot of different companies and realized, okay, maybe I should be in private equity, because otherwise I'd be in 25 industries and still people can't quite figure out what I do. But, I think at the end of the day, people doing what they're supposed to be doing is way more powerful than we talk about.
One last question, Frankie. It really is about the concept of others first culture. I've 100%. Never heard this before. This is a very new term inside our podcast. What is it? Why is it important?
Wait. You haven't heard others first culture in your podcast?
Mm-mm.
For God's sakes, who have you been talking to? I'm just kidding.
Ain't 5,000 people.
Oh my God. Okay, guys. Good. Well, listen, I used to be there, right? That was me. So here's the deal. The bottom line is that it's scary to do others first, because it's well, how the hell are we going to pay the bills? Right? It's well, if I don't make it client first, or if I don't make it money first, well, then we're going to fail. And everybody goes through this. Even people I've worked with at the Fortune 500 company that I went and sold the company to. It's a theme. It's because out of fear, we believe that because the God we pray to in capitalism is money, that we have to only serve that specific KPI, if you will, right? Or outcome, whatever you want to call them. So the bottom line is this. People, and now it's starting to come out. Now all of a sudden it's becoming trendy for thought leaders, people to talk about burnout and future of work and people matter and all this stuff, right? And so that now it's becoming a thing. But the truth is, it's becoming a thing because there's a demand, a revolt, if you will, from these other generations that are I don't want to live like this machine anymore. And maybe they watched The Matrix or other movies too many times growing up. But the fact is that the most amount of output that you're going to get from people is if they are feeling like they are supported, if they feel like they are valued, belong, trusted, and they're trusted early, right? I believe that you give trust up front, then you earn their trust, as opposed to the other way around. And you can see a whole level of people. And again, I'm not I've done this with my company, so I'm not wearing rose-colored glasses. I grew 60x with this mentality. And of course, everybody knew we were going to make money. But we were all working to make a product so good that is actually helping the user, right? Because we started getting out of this idea of customers and clients. And we were like, users. How do we make the user experience good? How do we make them want to buy instead of selling them things? Like when you create a culture around that and then everybody's in on it, it changes things. And if everybody's looking out for the other person, because everybody's going to get paid if we rise up and not just sales. And ours was a little bit different because we had distribution partners selling the software as opposed to like a sales force that was in-house. So, each company is going to be a little different, but there's a magic to making your whole company and your product about helping others. And so others first is just a matter of starting with the entrepreneur, the founder, the CEO, the C-suite, and really looking for ways that we as the C-suite, we as the leadership can empower the people that are below us. Instead of just being like, oh, you should have done this, or maybe we just remind them more, or maybe we're going to have a deal where we just have better accountability and we have more meetings. And like, that's what the secret is. Like, no, how can we empower them more, especially if we're taking stuff away? And we could go on and on. I know you're probably out of time. I'm talking too long, but does that answer your question?
It does. I mean, it is a different take. I think a lot of the clients that have come on here and the guest have said, and I call it the impossible question. I stopped asking it as much because I got tired of the same questions coming out all the time. But I asked them, in your leadership, what's more important, your customers or your employees? And Inc. 5000 founders, 93% of the time will say it's employees.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, then there you have it. I mean, if they're focused on the employees, your customers are taken care of. And it's the same concept, right? Yep. It's just a matter of practically speaking, what does that mean? And are we just saying that, or is that a reality?
I want to close this out with a short one, but here's the question. When you say others first, the way I first interpreted was we've created a culture where, hey, your ego and what you want, I'm not saying it's not important, but how do we put others first besides you as an employee?
Yeah.
Did I miss something there?
No, you did not. But it's not just about leadership. It starts with leadership, right? So it starts with the leadership, making it not just about them and you being served as the founder. And this is my company. You'll do what I tell you. Yep. So that's where it starts, right? But at the end of the day, it only works as if there's an accountability, right? So where everyone is looking out at the same type of mentality and measuring themselves accordingly. So employee reviews that we would do, this was the top of the list. Like if I'm evaluating this employee, like let's say I'm a middle manager and I'm looking at this employee, my first thing on my list is on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do I see them putting others first? Because here's the thing, if you create the culture, everybody's egos will be fine because everybody's serving everybody else. And so it works out. But of course, it has to start with the leadership on every level. But it's not just the top leadership. It's the middle management and it's the people at the bottom. The people at the bottom usually are the ones who are most open to doing this anyway. So there's a lot you can learn from those people.
Frankie, thanks for being here and sharing your wisdom.
Hey, man, my pleasure.
Great. I love talking about these things with, smart people who have figured things out. They're in the trenches. And the way Frankie unpacked today's concepts were really powerful, I think. First, very simple thing. Find out what your people are passionate about. Find out what truly drives them, and then give them more of that work. Yes, there are probably things in there that they don't want to do, and we all do things that we don't want to do at work. But the more time we spend doing things we're passionate about, the places where we want to grow and engage, the more aligned they will to performance and able to overcome certain challenges. We also talked about the others first culture. Love all of this because it really does align with the work I do when I'm coaching with someone. Is about how do you put others first? And I just didn't have the name for it, but thanks to Frankie, we do that now. So when you think of leadership, and you think of growth think Think Tank. As always, think of courage. We'll see you next time.